Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to continue with our Oathbreaker deck building series, as the community has selected Liliana of the Dark Realms to be the channel's third Oathbreaker. Coming up after the break, what was the community's choice for her signature spell? What's up, MTGBC? Here we are with another Build a Deck Tuesday video, and we are going to continue to build around Liliana of the Dark Realms as the channel's third Oathbreaker deck. If you missed any of the previous installments in this deck building series, you can click on the links in the description below to bring you right up to speed. The community's choice for Liliana of the Dark Realms' signature spell is Bubbling Muck, a sorcery that costs 1 black and says until end of turn, whenever a player taps a swamp for mana, it produces an additional black mana. Yes, this has the potential of helping out our opponents. However, as it's a sorcery, it will be cast during our turn. Our opponents will have to make sure that they have the mana available, as well as having something to cast at instant speed. So Bubbling Muck will be Liliana of the Dark Realms' signature spell. Now, let's include in this video the first 12 spells that we're going to add to the 58 card deck, as well as the mana base. So we're going to kind of reverse course here, whereas in the previous 2 Oathbreaker deck building series, we did the spells first and the land base last. This time, we're going to change it up. So the land base is going to be pretty self-explanatory since we're in mono black. We're going to play with a bunch of swamps, not necessarily all basic swamps. We'll include 1 copy of Witch's Cottage, which technically is a swamp, but it's not a basic land. This enters the battlefield tapped unless we control 3 or more other swamps. In this deck, that shouldn't be a problem. When Witch's Cottage enters the battlefield untapped, we may put target creature card from our graveyard on top of our library. A nice way in which to get some graveyard recursion just for the result of putting a land into play. Witch's Cottage is land number 1. Land number 2 that we're going to insert as part of our land base in this mono black Oathbreaker deck, we're going to include 1 copy of Cabal Coffers. Tap 2, tap this, add a black to our mana pool for each swamp we control. Now, the land itself cannot tap for mana, but that's not going to be a problem because we are going to make sure that we have oh so much mana floating around Cabal Coffers. So we have those 2 lands, and rounding out the rest of the mana base are going to be nothing but basic swamps. Well, are they really, truly, quote-unquote, basic swamps if we make them all snow-covered? That's right, folks. For this mono black Oathbreaker deck, our entire land base, well, technically almost all of our entire land base, is going to be beep boop, yep, droids over here, is going to be completely comprised of snow-covered swamps. I believe we have 2 dozen here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 24 snow-covered swamps, 1 Witch's Cottage, and 1 Cabal Coffers. That's going to set the tone for this big mana ramp deck. Now, let's throw in the 12 spells that are going to comprise the first 12 in the deck, our deck of 58. We're going to start off with a copy of Wayfarer's Bauble. Artifact that costs 1, and it reads, tap 2, tap Wayfarer's Bauble, and sacrifice it, search our library for a basic land card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. This will most likely, of course, be a snow-covered swamp. Wayfarer's Bauble is spell number 1. Next up, we have Burnished Heart, an artifact creature for a mana value of 3 and an activation cost of 3 on the body of a 2/2 elk. When we tap 3 and sacrifice the Burnished Heart, of course, we get to search our library for up to 2 basic lands, putting them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffling our library. Of course, similar to Wayfarer's Bauble, those 2 basic lands will be 2 snow-covered swamps. Next up, spell number 3, we are going to include a copy of Solemn Simulacrum. It is a golem creature with a mana value of 4 and a body of 2/2. When it ETBs, we search our library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped. Yes, the theme continues. It will be a snow-covered swamp. As an additional bonus, of course, when our sad robot here decides to hit the graveyard, we may draw a card. Of course, we will. And that is spell number 3. Now we start to make things a little more favorable with respect to including snow-covered swamps in our land base. And the reason for that is because we are also going to include a copy of Extraplanar Lens. It's an artifact with a mana value of 3. It has the imprint mechanic. When Extraplanar Lens comes into play, we may remove target land we control from the game. Whenever a land with the same name as the imprinted card is tapped for mana, its controller adds 1 mana to his or her mana pool for any type that land produced. Why is this beneficial to us? Because if we would have included regular basic lands, then our opponents would have also gained the benefit of Extraplanar Lens and being able to tap their swamps, their basic swamps, for 2 black mana. However, since our snow-covered swamps are markedly different and named different as well than a basic swamp, as long as our opponents aren't playing with a snow-covered swamp, only we will benefit from getting double the black mana by tapping a snow-covered swamp once it's imprinted with Extraplanar Lens. So we're kind of slanting the ability of having snow-covered swamps to our benefits, and Extraplanar Lens will help us to cast those big mana spells. Staying on theme with making our swamps as valuable as we possibly can, 1 copy of Caged Sun, an artifact that costs 6. When it comes into play, we choose a color. Of course, it's going to be black. Creatures we control the chosen color will get a power and toughness boost of +1/+1. However, more important to the purposes of this deck there, when a land's ability adds 1 or more mana of the chosen color to our mana pool, we add an additional mana of that color to our pool as well. So with Caged Sun in play, we tap our snow-covered swamp because it is black, and we are going to get an additional black mana. Caged Sun, Extraplanar Lens, we're trying to get the most bang for our snow-covered swamp buck. Staying on theme with big mana, of course, we're going to include a copy of Astral Cornucopia. It's an artifact with a casting cost of XXX. So at a minimum, you can cast this for 0 and do absolutely nothing with it in this deck. However, if we tap X to be 1 across the board for a complete mana value of 3, then we can tap this, choose a color, and add 1 mana of that color to our mana pool for each charge counter on Astral Cornucopia. Why we're including this to our deck is because we should have the ability, mid, late, potentially early game, to make Astral Cornucopia a much more valuable mana rock than just 1 black mana for a mana value of 3. Tapping 6 gives us 2 black, tapping 9 gives us 3 black, and by the time we're done constructing this deck, those should be very real possibilities. So Astral Cornucopia is going to act as a mana rock for this deck. All right, let's shift the focus away from colorless artifacts and artifact creatures to some mono black creatures that are going to help us with our mana. And the first one to include is going to be Cryptghast. 3 and a black, it's a 2/2 spirit with the extort mechanic. And of course, extort reads whenever we cast a spell, we may pay a white or a black. And if we do, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain that much life. So before anyone starts to light me up in the comment section below, extolling the virtues that this is a mono black Oathbreaker deck, so we cannot insert white cards into a mono black Oathbreaker deck, I will point out that the extort rules text is just reminder text. It is not adding the white colored identity to the Cryptghast card. This is a mono black card with reminder text that indicates the ability to pay a white or a black. It does not change the color of the card. This is a mono black card. And this 2/2 spirit reads, if we tap a swamp for mana, we add an additional black to our mana pool. So Cryptghast is going to be one of our swamp doublers. Same thing in mind for the next creature. We have one copy of Nirkana Revenant, 4 and 2 black for a 4/4 Vampire Shade, and again, similar to Cryptghast, whenever we tap a swamp for mana, we add a black to our mana pool. Because this is a shade, it also has the Shade Breathing ability, which is every black we tap can give Nirkana Revenant +1/+1 until end of turn. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any type of evasion, so perhaps that's something that we can work on as we move further through this deck building series. Nirkana Revenant will round out the creatures for this first 12 spells into our third Oathbreaker deck. Since we're dealing with the ability to have so many swamps on the battlefield and under our control, let's see if we can't utilize them more to our advantage than we have already. And a good way to do that is including a couple of equipment that will make our creatures even bigger due to the presence of these abundant swamps. And the first one we're going to show is Nightmare Lash. This is an artifact with a mana value of 4 that we equip with only paying 3 life. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each swamp we control. So based on the number of swamps we can get out onto the battlefield, and only being able to pay 3 life, we can really make a big creature very fast and tear down an opponent if he or she is not prepared. Same idea in mind with Nightmare Lash. We are also going to include a copy of Lash Writhe. It is also an equipment for 4. We can also equip it for the loss of life. This one will be the loss of 4 life, or we can pay 2 black mana, or we can pay any combination of 2 black mana and 4 life, i.e. 1 black mana and 2 life, or 2 black mana or 4 life in order to equip Lash Writhe onto a creature. However, when it ETBs, it is a living weapon, and that means that this equipment enters the battlefield, we create a 0/0 black germ creature token and then attach Lash Writhe to the germ. An equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each swamp we control. So very quickly we can get a creature into play that will be quite large, and again, we do not have to worry about tapping mana for the equip cost on this spell. Very, very advantageous, particularly in a deck that's going to be focused on getting lots of swamps in play and creating some awfully big mana. Speaking of getting swamps into play and creating awfully big mana, Spell 11 and Spell 12 in this current episode, these are going to be a couple of our win condition cards, because with Liliana of the Dark Realms, if we are ever able to alt her and get an emblem that allows us to get 4 black mana whenever we tap a swamp, then casting a spell like Exsanguinate will end up winning the game for us very, very quickly. Everyone should be familiar with this black game-ending spell. X and 2 black at sorcery speed. Each opponent loses X life, and we gain life equal to the life lost this way. Notice it says each opponent and not target opponent, so we skirt around the potential of our opponents having hexproof and/or shroud. Hexproof and/or shroud. Additionally, this has the opponent lose life as opposed to being dealt damage. You would think there isn't a big difference there, but there most certainly is, because loss of life cannot be prevented. Exsanguinate is Spell 11 in this video, and one of our win condition cards. And finally, card number 12, and the last one we're going to talk about in today's video, it is another win condition, and that's going to be Torment of Hailfire, a sorcery that, similar to Exsanguinate, is X and 2 black. And when we get our big amount of black mana, we're going to cipher it into Torment of Hailfire, and we're going to repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life, unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. Again, it says each opponent, so we don't have to worry about hexproof or shroud, and the loss of life cannot be prevented. So this is going to be one of our game-ending spells, and if we are able to generate enough mana, even if our opponents have a very high life total or a ton of resources in their hand and or on the battlefield, Torment of Hailfire minimally should put us so far ahead that it'll be too difficult for our opponents to get back in the game. And that is spell number 12. So what we have so far is we have our Oathbreaker, we have our signature spell, we have 24 snow-covered basic swamps and 2 other non-basic lands for 26 lands, and our first 12 spells in the 58. Tune in next time when we begin to install the rest of the deck, and I believe we will move towards the removal and disruption part of this deck. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.